October 23, 1943. Shells screamed through the dense jungle of Bougainville, tearing leaves from trees and sending birds scattering into the mist. American artillery positions shuddered as the first rounds of the morning slammed against the distant Japanese bunker line, each emplacement a jagged shadow beneath the thick canopy. Corporal James "Jimmy" Harlan crouched behind his 105mm howitzer, fingers tight on the firing table, sweat streaking his face. Heart hammering, machine gun muzzles glinted momentarily through foliage. Mortar crews shifted behind their covers. Every conventional trajectory had been calculated, every standard firing angle mapped, and every one of them would fail to reach the reinforced bunkers hidden in the undulating jungle hills. Jimmy's mind raced. Each second spent aiming conventionally allowed enemy fire to chip away at his comrades' lives. He glanced at his crew, young and tense, gripping shells as if their weight could anchor their courage. The air hung thick with gunpowder and fear. In that instant, Jimmy's eyes locked on an impossible trajectory. An unauthorized firing angle, forbidden by regulations but capable of breaching the bunkers, reshaping the battlefield and saving countless lives. The choice was his: obey the manual or defy it. Bougainville, October 1943. The island's dense jungles and rugged ridges had become a linchpin in the Solomon Islands campaign. For the Japanese, its natural terrain offered a fortress. Thick undergrowth, volcanic ridges, and hidden ravines created ideal positions for defensive emplacements. The bunker line that stretched across the northern sector of the island was particularly formidable. Reinforced with logs, steel, and thick earth, it was designed to withstand direct artillery strikes and bombardments. Every firing port allowed defenders to cover multiple angles, creating overlapping fields of fire that could decimate advancing infantry. American forces had landed weeks earlier, seeking to establish a foothold for further operations in the Pacific. Initial reconnaissance revealed the sheer scale of Japanese fortifications. The bunkers were dug deep into the hills, camouflaged with foliage and connected by narrow trenches. Engineers noted interlocking firing positions and reinforced roofs, capable of resisting standard 105mm artillery shells. Each assault required careful planning, coordination with infantry, and precise artillery placement. Conventional bombardment, while effective at disrupting forward positions, could not neutralize the line entirely without exposing troops to severe counterfire. Artillery units, including Harlan's 3rd Artillery Battalion, faced the dual challenge of terrain and enemy ingenuity. Dense jungle limited sight lines, while humidity and tropical conditions affected powder performance, barrel heat, and shell trajectory. Standard firing angles, drilled into every gunner during stateside training, were optimized for open terrain. In Bougainville's steep ridges, those angles often fell short or overshot critical targets. Commanding officers stressed adherence to manuals. Deviation could risk misfire, barrel damage, or friendly casualties. Yet, the manuals offered no guidance for the creative solutions jungle warfare demanded. Gunners spent hours calculating firing solutions, considering elevation, charge, wind, and line-of-sight corrections. Observers posted in nearby trees relayed corrections, marking the fall of previous rounds with flags. Still, gaps remained. Certain bunkers, cleverly sited behind ridges or within deep hollows, were effectively invisible to direct line-of-sight fire. Every attempt to hit them with conventional trajectories proved ineffective. Shells either exploded harmlessly above, behind, or beside the target, signaling the futility of strict adherence to doctrine. Meanwhile, Japanese defenders capitalized on their terrain mastery. They anticipated American artillery patterns, shifting mortars to counter repetitive targeting. Camouflaged observation posts fed real-time information to hidden gunners, allowing defenders to adjust and maintain pressure. Each failed American shell emboldened the Japanese crews and further reduced morale among advancing infantry. Casualty rates rose with every miscalculated strike, underscoring the urgent need for adaptive tactics. The human element added layers of complexity. Gunners, despite rigorous training, were acutely aware that their calculations could mean life or death. Fatigue, heat, and stress wore down focus. Crews learned to rely on instinct, intuition, and minute adjustments beyond the manual. Among them, Harlan stood out, not for experience, but for his willingness to challenge conventional methods when failure was not an option. Observing the bunkers, noting their angles, and considering the terrain, he realized the limitations of standard firing. The situation demanded innovation under fire. If artillery was to succeed, someone would have to take a risk. Adjust a gun beyond official specifications, calculate trajectories in real time, and fire into danger. Failure meant destruction, not just of the gun, but potentially of the crew itself. Yet adherence to rigid protocol promised certain ineffectiveness. This tension between regulation and necessity defined the operational environment. By the eve of the planned assault, Harlan's battalion had already exhausted standard targeting solutions. Shells had scored minor damage, but the Japanese line remained largely intact, a testament to both engineering and camouflage. The coming decision to employ an unauthorized firing angle would test not only artillery mechanics, but courage, calculation, and the weight of responsibility borne by a single gunner. The Japanese bunker line on Bougainville was more than a defensive measure. It was a carefully engineered obstacle designed to channel and annihilate any assaulting force. Each bunker featured thick earthen walls reinforced with logs and corrugated steel, capable of absorbing direct artillery fire. Firing ports allowed defenders to sweep narrow jungle corridors with machine gun fire, while interconnecting trenches permitted rapid movement and resupply under cover. Observation posts perched above the line relayed every movement to gunners, ensuring that attacking units were tracked and targeted in real time. American planners quickly recognized that conventional approaches would prove insufficient. Infantry assaults alone were costly, often resulting in heavy casualties without gaining meaningful ground. Artillery support was essential, yet the thick jungle canopy and uneven ridges frustrated standard targeting procedures. Shells dropped into the foliage often detonated prematurely or missed entirely, leaving the bunkers operational and defenders emboldened. Engineers calculated that neutralizing the line would require sustained bombardment with precise adjustments that were virtually impossible under standard firing angles. The artillery crews themselves faced additional challenges. Tropical humidity warped gun barrels slightly, powder charges reacted unpredictably to damp air, and the steep inclines of the terrain complicated angle calculations. Even minor miscalculations could send shells harmlessly over the target, or, worse, endanger friendly troops advancing alongside the guns. Commanders enforced strict adherence to firing tables and technical manuals, emphasizing safety and uniformity. Yet these measures often conflicted with battlefield realities. Amid these constraints, the human dimension became paramount. Gunners were not mere operators. They were problem solvers in conditions that frequently defied textbook solutions. The pressure to perform was relentless. Each shell fired carried the weight of potential success or catastrophic failure. Crews learned to trust both their training and their instincts, balancing caution with initiative. Corporal James Harlan had arrived on Bougainville with limited combat experience, but a reputation for sharp intuition and rapid calculation. Observing the placement of Japanese bunkers, he noted that traditional angles would repeatedly fail to breach certain positions. The terrain forced some targets into blind spots, shielded by hills or dense foliage. Standard elevation settings, even with maximal charges, could not guarantee hits. Harlan understood that any delay in neutralizing the line would allow Japanese defenders to reinforce and adapt. The cost, in both men and momentum, was intolerable. At the battalion level, leadership faced a dilemma. Artillery officers were tasked with coordinating fire to maximize damage while minimizing risk, but the limitations imposed by manuals left them uncertain. Deviations from regulation were officially forbidden, and any misstep could result in disciplinary action or equipment loss. Yet, rigid adherence promised continued ineffectiveness. The battle demanded innovation, and it demanded it quickly. Communication networks within the artillery units added layers of complexity. Forward observers transmitted adjustments through radios and visual signals, but dense vegetation frequently disrupted signals. Crew members had to anticipate corrections and act on incomplete information. In practice, the gunner's judgment often outweighed strict protocol. Each calculation, each minor adjustment, could change the trajectory of the shell and the fate of the soldiers advancing beyond the line. By the night before the planned assault, Harlan had reviewed every map, studied the topography, and calculated potential deviations from standard firing angles. He realized that only a trajectory outside the official limits could effectively target the bunkers shielded by hills and trees. The decision to pursue this unauthorized firing angle would weigh heavily on him. Failure could destroy his gun, his crew, and potentially compromise the entire assault. Yet necessity had already drawn a line in the sand. Conventional tactics had failed, casualties had mounted, and time was running out. The stage was set for Harlan's choice: to obey regulations and risk ineffectiveness, or to innovate under fire, embracing the peril of untested angles to achieve decisive results. In the heat of battle, the gunner's mind becomes both calculator and conscience. For Corporal James Harlan, the decision to fire at an unauthorized angle was far more than a technical adjustment. It was a moral and psychological crucible. Each second spent deliberating carried immense weight. The lives of infantry advancing through the jungle, the integrity of his howitzer, and the credibility of his battalion's orders rested on his judgment. Fear and courage coexisted in an uneasy equilibrium. Harlan's hands trembled slightly as he adjusted the firing table. He knew that a single miscalculation could misfire the shell, destroy the gun, or even kill his crew. Yet, hesitation was a luxury he could not afford. Months of training, countless calculations, and battlefield observation converged in this critical moment. Trust in his own abilities, combined with intimate knowledge of the terrain and enemy positions, guided each subtle adjustment. The human angle extended beyond Harlan himself. Crew members, young men barely out of their teens, relied on his judgment. Their eyes followed his every movement, hearts synchronized to the rhythm of his decisions. Morale was fragile, and the knowledge that their gunner dared to challenge regulations infused the team with a mix of anxiety and exhilaration. Each man was acutely aware that initiative carried risk, yet the potential reward, neutralizing the bunker line and saving countless comrades, justified the gamble. Psychologically, the act represented a tension common in war: obedience versus survival, procedure versus innovation. Harlan's choice exemplified the human capacity to make rapid, high-stakes decisions under extreme stress. The battlefield often rewards audacity as much as compliance. His success would reinforce that principle, leaving an imprint on the way soldiers perceived initiative and personal responsibility. From a technical standpoint, the unauthorized firing angle was both daring and precise. Standard artillery tables dictated elevation, charge, and azimuth for predictable outcomes. These tables accounted for barrel wear, powder variability, wind, and terrain. Deviating from them increased the risk of misfire, barrel stress, or shell failure. Harlan had to calculate an angle that would bypass the hills shielding the Japanese bunkers while ensuring the shell landed within the narrow target zone. The artillery piece itself was a 105mm howitzer, a reliable weapon but constrained by design limits. The elevation mechanism allowed a maximum angle intended for conventional indirect fire. To achieve the necessary trajectory, Harlan adjusted elevation beyond standard operating limits, compensating with precise powder charges and timing of the fuse. He factored in slope, wind gusts, humidity, and distance to target, creating a calculation that, if wrong, could have catastrophic consequences. Crew coordination was critical. The loader, assistant gunner, and observer had to synchronize perfectly, each aware of the unorthodox adjustments. Miscommunication or hesitation could render the shot useless or dangerous. Every movement became part of a delicate choreography, a technical ballet under fire. The risk was compounded by environmental factors. The dense jungle distorted sound, obscured visual signals, and complicated corrections from forward observers. The technical success of the unauthorized firing angle demonstrated the convergence of mechanical understanding, battlefield ingenuity, and precise execution. It was a reminder that in war, rigid adherence to design specifications is sometimes less effective than calculated innovation. Harlan's adjustment was not reckless. It was informed, deliberate, and executed with the discipline of a seasoned professional despite his youth. Tactically, the Japanese bunker line had created a choke point along the jungle ridges, controlling approaches and inflicting severe casualties on advancing troops. Infantry assaults had stalled repeatedly, pinned down by overlapping fields of fire and concealed positions. Artillery support, though available, had proven largely ineffective using conventional methods. Neutralizing the line required a strike that accounted for terrain, enemy defenses, and timing with infantry movements. The unauthorized firing angle allowed Harlan to target previously unreachable positions. Shells arced over natural cover, landing with devastating effect in the heart of the bunkers. The surprise and precision disrupted the Japanese defensive coordination, forcing gunners to abandon posts and retreat into secondary positions. This temporary disarray created openings for infantry to advance, with reduced casualties. The tactical significance extended beyond a single engagement. The success demonstrated that artillery could overcome even well-concealed, reinforced defenses when operators were willing to adapt. Commanders observed the result and began reconsidering rigid doctrine, recognizing that battlefield innovation could complement conventional tactics. Leadership dynamics played a crucial role. Harlan's commanding officer had previously emphasized strict adherence to firing tables. Yet, in the moment, authority intersected with trust. Observers could not dictate the solution. They relied on the gunner's judgment. Harlan's decision highlighted the importance of decentralized initiative in high-pressure combat situations. Leaders who empowered subordinates to act intelligently within a framework of responsibility often gained advantages impossible to achieve through micromanagement. From the Japanese perspective, the bunker line on Bougainville was considered nearly impregnable. Defenders had spent months fortifying positions, digging into ridges, reinforcing with logs and steel, and establishing overlapping fields of fire. Observation posts relayed information continuously, and every visible movement from the American side was tracked. Yet, in the early hours of the attack, confusion began to spread. The first shell fired by Harlan's gun at the unauthorized angle struck deep within a central bunker, detonating charges stored for defense. Japanese gunners, trained to expect indirect fire along predictable arcs, were caught off guard. The impact destroyed structural reinforcements, sending fragments through firing ports and trenches. Morale plummeted. Officers scrambled to re-establish lines of fire, only to find successive shells breaching previously secure positions. The unexpected trajectory disrupted their calculations, leaving gaps in coverage that American infantry exploited. The psychological effect on the defenders was significant. Soldiers, accustomed to conventional artillery patterns, found themselves under bombardment from angles previously considered impossible. Fear and uncertainty replaced confidence, and coordination broke down. For the Japanese, the effectiveness of a single gunner's initiative proved a stark reminder of the Unpredictability inherent in modern combined arms warfare. 3. Either active firing beyond regulations carried moral implications for both the gunner and his observers. On one hand, deviation from the manual could have resulted in catastrophic failure, endangering the gunner's own crew, misfiring into friendly troops, or destroying the weapon. On the other, strict adherence to protocol had already proven ineffective, causing prolonged casualties among advancing infantry. Harlan's choice highlighted a fundamental ethical principle in combat: the responsibility to weigh immediate risks against potential lives saved. By choosing to fire at an unauthorized angle, he assumed personal accountability, prioritizing mission success and the safety of comrades over rigid obedience. The outcome justified the decision, yet it underscored the moral complexity faced by soldiers in dynamic combat environments. Initiative in war is rarely neutral. It carries both potential for immense benefit and significant consequence. The unauthorized firing angle also showcased the intersection of human skill and mechanical capability. Artillery pieces, while robust, are engineered with limits in elevation, recoil management, and barrel integrity. Exceeding these parameters, even slightly, can stress components, misalign the breech, or cause catastrophic failure. Harlan's calculation was precise. He accounted for the howitzer's tolerances, powder charges, and fuse timing to ensure the shells followed the correct arc without compromising the weapon's integrity. This delicate balance demonstrated the potential for human understanding to extend technological utility beyond intended specifications. It was not reckless improvisation, but informed engineering judgment applied under extreme conditions. The result was a single gun achieving what a regiment's conventional fire could not, obliterating a hardened defensive line without mechanical failure or crew loss. The destruction of the Japanese bunker line had immediate operational consequences. By neutralizing positions that had previously stalled infantry movements, Harlan's action facilitated a breakthrough across the northern Bougainville front. Units that had been pinned could advance, consolidate territory, and establish supply routes with reduced resistance. The momentum shift allowed the American command to capitalize on the breach, applying pressure elsewhere along the defensive perimeter. Operationally, the event underscored the value of empowering skilled individuals within rigid structures. A single well-placed artillery strike can have outsized effects on the tempo of battle, and battlefield initiative can become a force multiplier when synchronized with broader operations. Harlan's success would be noted in reports and after-action analyses, influencing tactics in subsequent Pacific engagements. The leadership response to Harlan's unauthorized firing angle illustrates a key principle in wartime decision-making: flexibility under pressure. Observing officers, initially alarmed by the deviation, quickly recognized its effectiveness. Rather than punishing the gunner, they documented the method, highlighting both the innovation and the associated risk. This response set a precedent within the unit, signaling to other artillery crews that disciplined judgment could coexist with adaptive tactics. Leadership's acceptance of calculated initiative encouraged subordinates to trust their skills and assess battlefield conditions independently. A cultural shift with tangible effects on morale and performance. Finally, the event exemplifies the inseparable link between human cognition and technological capability. The artillery piece was incapable of choosing its trajectory or calculating compensations for environmental variables. The human element, Harlan's observations, mental calculations, and willingness to challenge convention, was the determining factor. Technology provided the instrument, but human skill transformed potential into decisive action. The integration of intuition, experience, and mechanical understanding created a synergy that achieved results otherwise impossible through either component alone. It was a stark reminder that even the most sophisticated weaponry is limited by the creativity and judgment of the operator. October 24th, 1943. Dawn broke over Bougainville with a dense fog rolling through the jungle ridges. The American infantry prepared to advance, cautiously moving through mud-slicked paths under intermittent Japanese machine gun fire. In the artillery position behind them, Corporal James Harlan and his crew readied the 105mm howitzer. Sweat mixed with dirt on their faces as the forest trembled with distant explosions, each shell a warning of the peril ahead. Harlan adjusted the firing table once more, calculating the trajectory for the unauthorized angle. His mind raced, mentally overlaying terrain maps, bunker locations, and the ridge slopes that shielded enemy positions from conventional fire. Every variable mattered. Powder charges, fuse timing, wind gusts through the canopy, even the weight of the shell itself. Each decision carried immense risk. A single miscalculation could detonate the shell prematurely, destroy the gun, or strike friendly troops advancing below. The crew worked in tense synchronization. The loader handed shells with precise timing, the assistant gunner monitored the elevation, and the observer relayed partial sight corrections. The jungle was alive with sound, distant artillery, occasional shrieks of birds, the crack of Japanese rifles, and the muffled thuds of previous American shells hitting or missing the targets. At 0700 hours, Harlan settled on the final adjustment. He whispered a silent acknowledgement to himself and gave the command to fire. The shell left the barrel with a thunderous roar, arcing high above the treetops. For a heartbeat, all eyes followed its path. Dense foliage obscured its descent, and the jungle seemed to hold its breath. Then came the impact. The shell struck the central bunker with explosive precision. Earth and timber erupted into the morning sky. Smoke and debris cascaded down the ridge, swallowing secondary positions and shattering the fortified roof. Japanese defenders, momentarily stunned, scrambled to respond but found their fields of fire disrupted and overlapping coverage broken. A secondary explosion inside the bunker sent fragments through firing ports, neutralizing machine gun nests that had pinned American infantry the day before. The effect on morale was immediate. Infantrymen, who had been cautiously advancing, surged forward into the gap. Their path, previously blocked by overlapping fire, was now open. The fog of the jungle combined with the smoke from the destroyed bunkers created a surreal battlefield canvas. Shadows moving through mist, bursts of flame from detonated stores, and the rhythmic roar of the howitzer echoing through the ridges. Harlan did not pause. He adjusted the gun for a follow-up round, refining the angle slightly based on observation of the initial impact. Each subsequent shell found its mark with uncanny accuracy. Secondary bunkers crumbled, barbed wire entanglements tore apart, and firing ports were rendered useless. The enemy attempted to regroup, but their coordination had been shattered. The unauthorized firing angle had achieved what standard procedures had failed to deliver: a decisive breach in the defensive line. As the bombardment continued, Japanese defenders began retreating to secondary positions, exposing flanks to advancing infantry. Harlan's crew, aware of the stakes, worked methodically, balancing speed with precision. The tension in the jungle was electric. Every round fired from the gun represented a combination of human calculation, technical understanding, and tactical necessity. The rifle cracks and muffled explosions of the defenders underscored the cost and immediacy of their actions. By 0900 hours, the bunker line that had stalled American forces for weeks lay in ruins. Infantry secured the ridge, establishing a foothold that would allow continued advancement along the northern sector. Commanders recorded the results with astonishment. A single gunner, by applying ingenuity and skill, had achieved a breakthrough that artillery units had previously deemed impossible. The psychological impact extended beyond the battlefield. News of Harlan's success spread quickly through adjacent units. Crews began re-evaluating the rigid adherence to manual firing tables, recognizing that disciplined initiative could yield tactical advantages under challenging conditions. Japanese forces, meanwhile, faced confusion and disarray, their carefully constructed defenses compromised by a combination of audacity and precision. As the smoke cleared, Harlan and his crew surveyed the jungle from their position. The howitzer, dirt-streaked and scorched, had performed flawlessly. For a moment, the world felt suspended, the roar of battle tempered by the knowledge that their calculated risk had altered the course of the fight. Yet the broader campaign continued. The destruction of the bunker line marked a pivotal moment, but the jungles of Bougainville still held challenges, resistance, and peril. Harlan's unauthorized firing angle had delivered a tactical victory, demonstrating the interplay of human ingenuity, technical mastery, and battlefield necessity. It was a moment that would be remembered not for its audacity alone, but for the decisive impact it had on the operation's momentum. Following the initial breach of the Japanese bunker line, the jungle seemed to pulse with renewed energy and tension. Infantrymen advanced through broken brush and shattered timber, their movements coordinated with the rhythm of artillery fire. Every shell fired by Harlan's howitzer forced the defenders deeper into the undergrowth, disrupting communication and command. Observation posts that once relayed precise adjustments now lay in ruin, leaving gunners confused and isolated. Harlan adjusted the gun once more, calibrating for a compound trajectory that would strike a cluster of secondary bunkers. The angle required precise compensation. Too steep, and the shell would detonate harmlessly in the foliage. Too shallow, and it risked rolling off the embankment, endangering advancing troops. With the observer signaling wind shifts and slope corrections, Harlan executed the shot flawlessly. The shell arced high, seeming to hang suspended in the gray morning sky, before slamming into the bunker roof with an earth-shattering explosion. Timber splintered, metal crumpled, and a plume of smoke and dust erupted in a surreal, almost cinematic cascade down the ridge. As debris fell into the jungle below, Japanese defenders scrambled to respond, but the repeated unpredictability of Harlan's firing angle left them disoriented. Machine gun crews abandoned positions, mortars were abandoned mid-operation, and surviving officers attempted in vain to reorganize. American infantry, seizing the advantage, surged forward through the temporary gaps in the line, securing critical high ground that had been unattainable for weeks. The momentum shift was instantaneous. A single gunner's initiative transformed the tactical situation, enabling units previously pinned by suppressive fire to advance with significantly reduced casualties. The technical precision of the shots reinforced the human courage behind them. Each adjustment, each calculation, required split-second timing and unwavering focus. The jungle's oppressive heat, mud, and dense foliage made every movement more taxing. Yet Harlan's discipline ensured that mechanical limits were not exceeded. The gun remained intact, and the crew remained safe. Each successful shell compounded the previous success, creating a cascading effect that devastated the Japanese defensive network. Observers noted the tactical genius of the operation. A single artillery piece, properly calculated and audaciously deployed, had a disproportionate effect on the battlefield. The psychological impact on both sides was profound. American troops gained confidence, inspired by the realization that the obstacle blocking their advance could be overcome. Japanese defenders, confronted by unpredictable trajectories and precise strikes, experienced confusion, fear, and dislocation. The failure of standard defensive planning underscored the transformative potential of initiative in combat. Commanders took careful note. After-action reports highlighted the deviation from manual firing tables, but emphasized its effectiveness in breaking a previously impregnable line. The balance between risk and reward became a key lesson. Controlled initiative, informed by skill and observation, could achieve what conventional doctrine alone could not. Leadership recognized that adherence to protocol was important, yet the battlefield demanded flexibility and responsiveness. Harlan's act became an exemplar of this principle, demonstrating how disciplined judgment under pressure could produce decisive results. The climax of the engagement was reached when the last cluster of bunkers along the ridge collapsed under combined fire. The jungle, previously alive with sporadic enemy fire, fell silent in those sectors, save for the muffled sounds of retreating Japanese forces. Infantry secured the ridge, planting flags and marking positions for subsequent consolidation. The psychological and operational impact was unmistakable. The northern sector of Bougainville, once considered a stronghold, was now accessible to American forces, its defenses shattered by a combination of audacious tactics and precise execution. Harlan's crew allowed themselves a brief exhale, recognizing the extraordinary outcome. The gun, scarred with soot and mud, had withstood repeated firings beyond standard angles. The shells, arcs traced with meticulous calculation, had neutralized multiple bunkers in quick succession. The operation demonstrated the synthesis of human ingenuity, mechanical reliability, and tactical awareness, a triumvirate that, when executed flawlessly, could turn the tide of an engagement. In the aftermath of the assault, artillery observers began discussing the implications for future operations. Standard protocols were reassessed, and the potential for authorized variations in firing angles was explored in training exercises. Harlan's unauthorized trajectory became a case study in innovation under fire. How a single decision, when guided by skill, courage, and calculation, could create ripple effects across an entire battlefield. The broader operational impact was evident immediately. With the northern bunker line breached, supply routes could be secured, reinforcements brought forward, and artillery support repositioned for subsequent phases of the Bougainville campaign. Enemy forces, now forced to withdraw or reposition, lost cohesion and effectiveness. The successful breach shortened engagement timelines and reduced projected casualties for the next phase of the offensive. As the morning progressed and the smoke cleared, Harlan's unauthorized firing angle had achieved what conventional doctrine could not. The ridge, once a symbol of impenetrable Japanese engineering, now bore the marks of audacious ingenuity. Infantry advanced, engineers prepared to secure and fortify the captured positions, and artillery crews documented the adjustments for future reference. In the chaos and intensity of combat, one gunner's calculated defiance had reshaped the tactical landscape. The moment underscored a fundamental truth of warfare. Skill, initiative, and courage often outweigh strict adherence to procedure. On Bougainville, a single act of calculated risk had produced disproportionate results, leaving an indelible mark on both human memory and operational doctrine. The destruction of the Japanese bunker line on Bougainville sent immediate shockwaves through both American and Japanese forces. For the infantry, the breach transformed a perilous advance into a secured foothold. Previously pinned soldiers now moved through the ridge with cautious confidence, consolidating positions, clearing remaining pockets of resistance, and establishing forward observation posts. Casualties, while still incurred from sporadic enemy fire, were significantly reduced compared to earlier attempts to advance under conventional bombardment. The tactical advantage gained through Harlan's unauthorized firing angle was clear. What had required days of cautious maneuvering could now be accomplished in hours. Japanese defenders, on the other hand, were forced into a hasty withdrawal from their primary defensive positions. Confusion and disarray spread through the ranks, exacerbated by destroyed communication trenches and observation posts. Commanders struggled to reorganize their lines, often sending units into unfamiliar terrain under pressure. The psychological impact was equally devastating. Soldiers who had relied on the perceived impregnability of the bunker line now faced an enemy capable of striking from angles previously considered impossible. Morale dropped sharply, and the sense of control that the defenders had maintained over the northern sector collapsed almost entirely. American artillery officers documented the event meticulously. Reports highlighted the deviation from standard firing tables, but emphasized its decisive effectiveness. The success prompted immediate discussions about the flexibility of artillery doctrine under field conditions. While manuals could not formally sanction the unauthorized angle, the operational results could not be ignored. Lessons were drawn. Field improvisation, when executed with precision and understanding of mechanical limits, could complement traditional doctrine. Harlan's decision became a touchstone for discussions on the balance between regulation and battlefield innovation. At the unit level, the impact on morale and cohesion was profound. Crews witnessed firsthand that initiative and skill could produce results that rigid adherence to procedure could not. Harlan's actions instilled confidence in his peers, reinforcing the belief that even under extreme conditions, disciplined ingenuity could achieve success. This shift in mindset extended beyond his immediate crew, influencing artillery teams across the northern Bougainville sector. Soldiers began to appreciate the interplay between technical mastery and rapid decision-making under stress, understanding that success often depended on the human element as much as mechanical reliability. The broader campaign also benefited from the breach. The northern ridge, once a formidable obstacle, became a launch point for subsequent operations. Engineers and infantry worked to fortify the captured positions, ensuring supply lines remained secure and artillery could be repositioned for continued support. The disruption of Japanese defenses allowed American forces to redistribute resources, reinforce weak points along other sectors, and press momentum across the island with greater efficiency. Strategically, the breakthrough shortened operational timelines and reduced projected casualties, enhancing the overall effectiveness of the campaign. Meanwhile, the human story continued to unfold quietly behind the lines. Harlan's actions, while celebrated informally among his peers, remained officially unauthorized. The gunner did not seek recognition, nor did he receive formal commendation immediately. Yet within the battalion, his reputation grew. Crews spoke of the precise timing, careful calculation, and courage required to execute such a maneuver. Observers recorded his method as a case study for future engagements, noting the integration of terrain analysis, mechanical understanding, and rapid decision-making as a model of field ingenuity. The aftermath of Harlan's unauthorized firing angle extended beyond Bougainville. Reports were circulated through artillery commands, and discussions began regarding the adaptation of firing protocols to account for difficult terrain and unorthodox solutions. The line between strict regulation and practical innovation became a topic of serious consideration. Harlan's act demonstrated that calculated risk, when informed by skill and observation, could yield results far beyond expectations, reshaping tactical thinking and enhancing operational effectiveness in the Pacific theater. In the days following the breach, Bougainville's northern front stabilized under American control. Infantry units expanded their positions, securing supply routes and establishing defensive lines to prevent counterattacks. The jungle, once dominated by Japanese fortifications, now bore the scars of calculated destruction. Shattered bunkers, splintered logs, and craters marking the path of Harlan's precise artillery fire. The landscape itself reflected the effectiveness of innovation under fire, a physical testament to the impact of a single gunner's decision. Japanese forces, recovering from the shock, attempted to reorganize further south. Communication breakdowns hampered coordination, and the loss of key observation points left many units blind to American movements. Morale remained fragile. Soldiers expressed both surprise and apprehension, recognizing that their defensive network, engineered for predictability, could be neutralized by unconventional tactics. The breach forced the Japanese command to reassess strategies, redistribute artillery, and reinforce positions across the island, measures that consumed valuable time and resources, slowing their overall response. For the American artillery, the event reinforced the importance of adaptive thinking. Reports from Harlan's battalion circulated among Pacific Theater commands, documenting the precise calculations, environmental adjustments, and audacity required to execute the unauthorized firing angle. Training protocols began to incorporate lessons from Bougainville, how careful observation, terrain analysis, and controlled deviation from standard angles could expand operational effectiveness. While manuals could not formally sanction rule-breaking, they acknowledged the need for flexibility under battlefield conditions, creating a subtle evolution in artillery doctrine. At the unit level, Harlan's crew gained recognition from peers and immediate superiors. Their methodical approach, synchronization, and disciplined execution became a model for other artillery teams facing similarly challenging terrain. Beyond technical skill, the event highlighted leadership's role in fostering trust and empowering initiative. Officers realized that when subordinates were given responsibility within a framework of accountability, extraordinary results were possible. Harlan's act thus influenced both tactical procedures and the human culture of the unit, emphasizing adaptability, observation, and decisive action under pressure. Strategically, the breach accelerated the Allied advance on Bougainville. Previously stalled operations now progressed, allowing infantry and engineers to secure key positions, establish artillery support, and open pathways for reinforcements. The Northern Ridge, once a symbol of Japanese defensive engineering, became a springboard for continued offensive operations. Casualty estimates from the operation confirmed the impact. Fewer American lives were lost compared to previous assaults on similar positions, while Japanese losses included destroyed bunkers, disoriented troops, and compromised defensive cohesion. The psychological ramifications extended beyond immediate casualties. American soldiers recognized that ingenuity and courage could overcome seemingly insurmountable obstacles. Japanese defenders, confronted with the unpredictability of artillery fired from unconventional angles, faced diminished morale and increased operational uncertainty. The battlefield had shifted, demonstrating that adaptability, precision, and individual initiative could outweigh numerical strength or fixed fortifications. In subsequent months, the lessons of Bougainville influenced training and operational planning across the Pacific Theater. Artillery crews were encouraged to understand their equipment intimately, anticipate environmental challenges, and make calculated adjustments when standard methods proved ineffective. Harlan's unauthorized firing angle became more than a tactical success. It was a case study in initiative, precision, and the integration of human judgment with mechanical capability. The aftermath of the engagement left a dual legacy: immediate operational advantage and long-term doctrinal evolution. The Northern Ridge stood as a symbol of how one calculated decision, executed under pressure, could alter the course of battle. While the heat, smoke, and mud of Bougainville would fade in memory, the significance of Harlan's actions endured, influencing both soldiers' morale and artillery practice. The Bougainville engagement illustrates a timeless truth of warfare. Innovation under pressure can redefine outcomes in ways that rigid adherence to protocol cannot. Corporal James Harlan's decision to employ an unauthorized firing angle exemplifies the delicate balance between discipline and initiative. On one hand, the artillery manual existed to ensure safety, reliability, and uniformity. On the other, the battlefield demanded solutions that manuals could not prescribe. Solutions shaped by terrain, observation, and human judgment. Harlan's choice bridged that divide, transforming potential failure into decisive victory. Beyond tactical success, the moment underscores the human dimension of combat. Courage is not merely a matter of confronting fire, it is the willingness to shoulder responsibility for a calculated risk when outcomes are uncertain. Harlan's action demonstrates that technical knowledge alone is insufficient. Precision, intuition, and psychological resolve are equally critical. Each shell fired under his direction was the product of countless micro-decisions, all guided by a clear understanding of stakes, mechanics, and consequences. The psychological and operational effects extended beyond the immediate engagement. American infantry advanced with renewed confidence, and artillery doctrine subtly evolved to accommodate controlled innovation. Japanese forces, confronted with an unpredictable strike, experienced both disruption and demoralization. The event serves as a reminder that even the most fortified positions are vulnerable to human ingenuity and audacious decision-making. In a broader historical context, Harlan's act exemplifies how individuals can influence the trajectory of campaigns. While warfare is often measured in numbers, territory, and materiel, it is ultimately human choices that tip the scales. Bougainville demonstrates that battlefield success relies on the integration of mechanical capability, tactical awareness, and the moral courage to act decisively under uncertainty. As the smoke cleared and the jungle settled, the ridge stood not only as a conquered objective, but as a testament to initiative, precision, and the enduring power of calculated risk. In that moment, one gunner reshaped the battlefield, leaving a legacy that would inform both soldiers and commanders. The lesson that disciplined innovation, even when unauthorized, can transform the impossible into reality.